but, Mom, how come nobody ever buys you flowers?
The candle on the table between them had burned so low. The wax was running onto the white cloth. That was the first thing the boy noticed. Not the music, something slow, and French playing through speakers, hidden somewhere in the ceiling. Not the couples around them, pressing close over plates of food they weren't really eating. Not the enormous red arrangements of roses, mounted at the hostess stand, like something from a funeral, that had been told to smile. He noticed the candle. And then, he looked at his mother. She was reading the menu, or pretending to. Her eyes hadn't moved in 2 minutes. The restaurant, Maison Elise, on Michigan Avenue, the kind of place where they fold your napkin into a swan, and the bread costs $11, was doing what it did every February 14th. Flowers at every table, a pianist now, a man in his 60s, replacing the recorded French music, who had begun playing something that made 2 women near the window quietly hold hands, waiters in white moving between tables with the confidence of people who understood that tonight every order was a small performance of love. Except at table 12. Table 12 had a woman in a burgundy wrap dress. Her hair was pulled back with a precision that took 40 minutes. Her earrings were gold. Her posture was flawless. She was 34 years old, and she was sitting across from a 7-year-old boy who was wearing a clip-on tie. He had chosen himself at Target, and she was pretending, very carefully, that she was not the only grown woman in this restaurant who had come alone. The boy's name was Fred. He had been watching the room for 11 minutes. He had counted. He watched a man at the table to their left reach into his jacket and produce a small velvet box. He watched the woman across from that man cover her mouth. He watched the waiter, who pretended not to see, but absolutely saw, and who smiled into his order pad. Fred looked back at his mother. She was still looking at the menu. He said, quietly, the way he said most things, not to the table, not to the room, just to her. Mom, how come nobody ever buys you flowers? She didn't put the menu down. She didn't look at him right away. She reached for her water glass, and her hand was perfectly steady, and she took one long sip, set it down. Then she looked at her son, across the candlelight, and she smiled the specific smile she had built over 6 years, the one that said, everything is fine, the one that said, we are okay, the one that said, I am not afraid. I have you, she said. That's better. Fred looked at her for a long moment. He looked at the candle. He looked back at her. And he did not look convinced. What happens in the next 30 minutes will change both of their lives, but not in the way you are thinking. Not even close. If this already has your attention, stay with me, like the video, and subscribe right now because what happens next will shock you. Her name was Danielle Johnson. And here is what you need to understand about Danielle. Before this night unfolds, she was not a woman who felt sorry for herself. She did not have the time. She woke every morning at 5:15. She made Fred's lunch the night before. Always cut diagonally, always with a note folded inside the bag. That she wrote in green ink because green was his favorite color. She dropped him off at school by 7:40. Was at her desk at the agency by 8:15. And she did not leave until the work was done. She was a digital marketing strategist at Carver & Lane, a mid-sized Chicago agency with a client list that leaned heavily toward real estate and finance. She was good at her job. She was exceptionally good at her job. Her campaigns had a conversion rate her colleagues could not replicate, and she knew it. And she never said it out loud. She had learned early, very early, that competent black women, who also happened to be single mothers, were not rewarded for announcing their competence. They were tolerated for it. There is a difference. Her boss, a woman named Gretchen Whittled, called her our best creative mind in meetings, and had not promoted her in 3 years. You're carrying so much already, Gretchen said once, touching Danielle's arm in a way that was meant to feel like support. I just don't want to overload you. Danielle had smiled. She was very good at smiling. Fred's father, a man named Julius, who still called sometimes on Sunday nights, always from a number she didn't recognize, always with a new reason why things were going to be different now, had left when Fred was 14 months old. Not because of another woman, not because of money. Though they had little, he left because, as he had told her 3 days before he went, I just don't think I'm built for this kind of life. He meant the diapers, the 3 a.m. crying, the weight of something that required you to stay. Danielle had taken Fred to her mother's for 2 days after that. She had not cried in front of anyone. She had driven home on day 3, walked into the apartment, stood in the kitchen for a very long time, looking at a bowl of apples on the counter, and then she had begun. She was good at beginning. Tonight was her cousin Tasha's idea. Tasha is the kind of woman who said exactly what she thought and was correct about 80% of the time, had made the reservation 3 weeks ago. "You are going to that restaurant," Tasha had said over the phone, "with Fred. You're going to dress up, and he's going to dress up, and you're going to sit in that nice place, eat something that costs too much, and you're going to let yourself feel nice for one evening, you hear me?" "I hear you," Danielle had said. "Don't do that voice." "What voice?" "The one where you agree with me, so I'll stop talking." Tasha was not wrong about the voice. At table 7, diagonally across the room, from table 12, a man sat alone. He was Korean, 41. He wore a blue suit that had not been bought off a rack. He had a glass of Bordeaux he had barely touched, and an open notebook in front of him. Actual paper, actual pen. And he was writing something slowly, pausing often to look at nothing in particular. His name was Lee Min-ho. He had been in Chicago for 4 days, for a series of meetings with a water infrastructure startup. He'd agreed to fund at the Angel round. He was also the silent financial backer of 2 experimental art galleries in Wicker Park Investments. His accountant called creative tax positioning, and that Min-ho called. In the rare moments he explained himself to anyone, "The only work I do that embarrasses me in a useful way." He had come to Maison Elise because his business partner, David Harrington, had made the reservation for a client dinner that the client had canceled 2 hours before. David had looked at Min-ho across their shared office and said, "The table's paid for, might as well use it." And then David had gone back to his phone. Min-ho had come alone because he was nearly always alone, and had made a kind of peace with it that was not quite peace. He noticed the woman in the burgundy dress when he sat down. He noticed the boy across from her. He noticed the way the boy was watching the room, not with a child's distraction, moving from thing to thing, but with a quiet, sustained attention that Min-ho recognized because he had been that kind of child himself. He went back to his notebook. Then the boy said something. Min-ho couldn't hear the words, but he saw the woman's hand pause on her water glass. He saw her drink, he saw her smile, and something about the sequence of those 3 things made him stop writing. The elderly waitress who had been working at Maison Elise for 19 years, named Ruth, was 63, Filipino-American, with reading glasses on a chain around her neck and the particular calm of someone who had seen every version of Valentine's Day. This restaurant had to offer the proposals, the breakups, the first dates that turned into last dates, the anniversaries that ended in silence. She had noticed the boy at table 12 the moment he walked in. It wasn't the clip-on tie. Though the clip-on tie helped, it was the way he walked. Behind his mother, not beside her, behind her, as if he understood on some wordless level that she might need protecting from behind. Ruth brought them bread before they asked. She brought Fred a Shirley Temple, with 2 cherries. She set it down in front of him. "A gentleman deserves a proper drink," and Fred said, "Thank you, ma'am," with a gravity that made her want to sit down. By 9 o'clock. The restaurant had begun its ritual. The pianist had shifted to standards. A waiter carried a slice of chocolate cake to a nearby table with a single candle, and the room gave its small collective murmur of applause. Danielle was listening to Fred explain, at length, why his friend Denver Jr. thought sharks were the smartest animal, but Fred believed it was actually crows, and she was nodding in the right places, and for a moment, just a moment, she was not performing anything, she was just there. That was when she saw him, Julius, not her son, her ex. He came through the front door, with a woman on his arm, young, in a red dress, laughing at something he'd said. Before they even reached the hostess, Julius was wearing a suit Danielle had never seen. He looked good. That was the first thing. Her brain registered. Before everything else. Before the anger. Before the grief she had buried. Under 6 years of early mornings. He looked good. He hadn't looked at table 12 yet. He was still with the hostess. Fred stopped talking about crows. He had seen his father. Danielle watched her son's face move through something she could not name. Not anger, not happiness, not even surprise, but something older and quieter than all of those. The expression of a child who has spent years already practicing for this exact moment, and now that it has arrived, does not know what he had been practicing for. Fred, she said, quietly. Just his name. He looked at her. I see him. We're okay. Julius found his table. It was 3 tables away. He sat with his back to them. He had not seen Danielle, or if he had decided not to. That silence was worse than anything he could have said. Fred put his Shirley Temple down. He reached across the table and put his small hand on top of his mother's hand. He didn't say anything. He just put his hand there. And Danielle, who had not cried in a restaurant, had not cried in front of her son, had not cried in front of anyone, in longer than she could accurately remember, felt the back of her throat close. She breathed again. She turned her hand over and held his. At table 7. Lee Min-ho had stopped pretending to write. He had watched all of it. He was not a man who stared. He had learned, at great cost, the discipline of watching, without being seen. But his eyes had moved to table 12, when the energy in that section of the room shifted. He had seen the woman's face do something that took real training to hold together. He had seen the small hand reach across the table. He set his pen down. This was the moment, though Lee Min-ho did not know it yet, that this story actually began. What happened next was not planned. It was not strategic. It was a 7-year-old boy who had been sitting quietly and watching his mother pretend to be fine for what felt to him like his entire life, making one small decision. Fred got up from the table. Fred, Danielle said. He walked to the hostess stand. Ruth saw him coming and intercepted him gently. Sweetheart, can I help you? I want to buy my mom flowers. The ones up there. He pointed at one of the enormous arrangements. How much is one of those? Ruth looked at the arrangements, then at the boy, then at the small hand going into the pocket of his clip-on tie-wearing dress pants and producing $4.75. He laid it on the hostess counter. $4. 3/4, flat on the marble. That's what I have. He was looking at the money, not at Ruth. I was saving it for a Lego set, but she's been sad, and I think she should have flowers. The restaurant was not silent. The piano was still playing. Glasses were still clinking, but the 4 people closest to the hostess stand had gone very quiet. Ruth looked at the $4.75 for a long moment. Wait here 1 moment, sir. She disappeared through a door. And at table 7, Lee Min-ho had seen all of it. If you feel what she is feeling right now, comment 1 word below. Just 1 word. I want to know. Ruth came back with a single white rose. She had found it in the kitchen, from the florist's delivery box, not yet arranged. She had trimmed the stem. She had tied a small red ribbon around it. From where? No one asked. She held it out to Fred. Consider it a professional discount for distinguished gentlemen. Fred took the rose. He looked at it. Then he looked at his money, still on the counter. You keep it, Ruth said. Buy the Lego set. Your mom's going to like this better anyway. He carried the rose back to the table with both hands. He held it out to his mother. Happy Valentine's Day, Mom. Danielle took the rose. She looked at it. She looked at her son, and she did the thing she had promised herself she would not do. Not here, not in public, not in a room full of couples who already looked at her table and saw exactly what they thought they saw. She cried. Not dramatically, not loudly, 1 tear and then another, and then she pressed her fingers to her mouth and looked at the ceiling and breathed, got herself back, but not before the table. To their right had noticed, and the couple behind them, and a man in a blue suit at table 7, who was already on his feet. She saw him coming, and her first thought was, please don't. Her second thought was, he's going to say something kind, and I am going to absolutely fall apart. Min-ho stopped at the edge of table 12. He did not pull up a chair. He did not crouch to Fred's level, in the performative way adults sometimes did. He stood. He looked at Danielle, then at Fred. That was a good thing you did, he said to Fred. Fred considered him for a moment. Are you alone? Min-ho paused. Yes. On Valentine's Day? Fred. It's okay, Min-jun said, and then to Fred. Yes, on Valentine's Day. That's sad. Fred said, with the complete honesty of someone who has not yet learned that some truths require packaging. Something shifted in the man's face. Not a smile exactly, something that had been near a smile for a long time. "It is a little," he said. Danielle looked at this man she did not know. He was not performing kindness. He was not looking at her with the specific pity she had grown expert at identifying. He was simply standing at the edge of her table, having said a true thing to her son. And now he was looking at her. Not the way men looked at her when they wanted something, but the way someone looks at another person when they have recognized something. "Danielle Johnson," she said. She did not know why. She gave him her full name. She always gave people just her first name. "Lee Min-ho." He looked at the rose in her hand. "Beautiful choice," he said to Fred. Fred seemed to decide something. "You can sit with us. If you want, we have a chair." "Fred," Danielle said again. "Mom, he's by himself." Fred looked at her with an expression she recognized because it was her own expression, the one that said, "We take care of people, that's who we are." "That's not good." Lee Min-ho looked at Danielle. A question. She looked at the rose, then at her son. "One drink," she said. It was not easy, it was not the way movies make it. Two people at a table, finding each other inevitable. There were long silences. There was the awkwardness of Fred asking Lee Min-ho questions at the pace of a customs interview. Where did he live? What did he do? Did he have a dog? Why not? What was Korea like? Had he ever seen a crow do something smart? Lee Min-ho answered everything. He answered with the steady attention of a man who was used to meetings where he was the one asking questions, discovering that being on the other side was stranger and more interesting than he'd expected. He turned to Danielle. "What do you do?" "Marketing, digital." She folded her hands on the table. "Strategy." "What company?" "Carver and Lane." "Carver and Lane." Very still. "Carver and Lane." "Carver and Lane. Handled the launch campaign for a company I funded 2 years ago, Aqua Bridge." He paused. "The water access startup." Danielle stared at him. Because she had run that campaign, she had built the entire digital strategy from scratch. She had written the copy, designed the targeting, managed the metrics. It was the best work she had ever done. "They gave me no credit for that campaign." Her voice was very calm. "Publicly." Min-ho looked at her. "I know." He said it simply. "I noticed. I asked about it. They said it was a team effort." The pianist had moved into something slower. "I saw your name in the internal report. I remember thinking whoever built this understood the actual problem, not just the product." Danielle looked at the tablecloth. She pressed the stem of the white rose between 2 fingers. She said nothing for a long time. Fred had fallen asleep against her side, his clip-on tie slightly askew, his breathing, the long, slow breathing of a child who had decided the adults were going to be okay. "He does that," Danielle said softly. "Goes out like a light when he decides a situation is resolved." Min-ho looked at the sleeping boy. "He's carrying a lot." She looked at him, sharp. "I'm not criticizing. I did the same thing. I was the same kind of child." She held that. "He's fine," she said. The word came out the way the word always came out, when she meant something else. "We're fine. I know you are." "That's not what I said." The distinction landed somewhere. It was not supposed to land. Across the room, Julius had seen her. Danielle didn't notice the exact moment. She was looking at Min-ho, then at Fred, then at the rose. But she felt it the way you feel. Someone staring at the back of your head. She turned, and there he was, her ex-husband, looking at table 12, looking at the man in the blue suit, looking at Danielle in the dress and the earrings, with an expression she had never seen on his face. In all their years together, he looked, she realized, surprised, not at her, at the situation, at the fact that the story he had built in his head, the one where she was fine, but staying still, manageable, safe in the amber of her difficulty, had turned out to be a different story entirely. His date said something to him. He turned back. Danielle turned back too. "Are you all right?" Min-ho said. "That's my son's father." She did not look in Julius's direction again. "He's here with someone." Min-ho said nothing for a moment. "I see. Do you want to leave?" "No," Danielle said, faster than she expected. She straightened in her chair. She set the rose down in front of her. "No," she said again. "I dressed up. Fred put on a clip-on tie. We're staying." Something moved through Minho's face. Not a smile. Not quite. Something older than a smile. "Good." And they stayed. If your heart is pounding right now, hit that like button. Don't move. Stay with me. 3 weeks after Valentine's Day, Danielle received an email. It was from an address she didn't recognize. A private domain. The subject line said, Aqua Bridge Phase 2. Partnership Inquiry. She read it 3 times. Lee Min-ho was expanding Aqua Bridge into 2 new markets, Philadelphia and Atlanta. He needed a digital strategy partner who understood infrastructure communication, community trust, and the emotional architecture of reaching populations that had learned to distrust large organizations with clean logos and noble-sounding names. He had been looking for someone since October. He had found her 2 years ago, in an internal campaign report. He had confirmed it 3 weeks ago, at a restaurant on Michigan Avenue. The proposal was not a favor. It was not charity. It was a contract, a real one, with real numbers. Numbers that made Danielle sit back in her desk chair and put both hands flat on her thighs and breathe. For a year of strategy consulting at an equity stake, she had never been offered by anyone. At the bottom of the email, after the formal language and the attached terms, he had written one additional line, the credit line, on the Phase 1 campaign, will be corrected in the public record. My team is handling it. It should have been done then. I apologize that it wasn't. She closed the laptop. She sat. She opened it again. She called Tasha. "Say something," Tasha said, after 30 seconds of silence on the line. "I don't know what to say. Start with, I'm about to say yes." "Tasha." "Danielle, listen to me." Tasha's voice dropped to something serious. Something she almost never was. "You have been outrunning what people think you are, for so long that you forgot to notice, when someone finally looked at what you actually are. Say yes." Danielle looked at the email. She looked at the white rose she'd put in a glass of water on her desk 21 days ago, and somehow it had not yet died. It had gone papery at the edges, but it was still holding its shape, still white. "There's something else." "I knew it." He mentioned, in conversation that night, that he grew up wealthy, but that his father never came to anything, not one school event, not one graduation. His father sent money and sent staff, sent everything except himself. He said he funded art companies because art was the one thing he did as a child that his father never knew anything about. It was the one place that was only his. Tasha was quiet. "That's why he noticed Fred," Danielle said. Not a question, the understanding arriving the way real understanding does. Not in a flash, but like a key finding a lock. It was always meant for. Recognized the child who was watching the room. He had been that child, the child at the adult table, who learned that love was something performed from a distance, by people who could afford to be absent. He had grown up. He had built a different life. Successful. Careful. He had dinner alone on Valentine's Day, in a city that wasn't his, in a restaurant where everyone else came in pairs, and across the room, a 7-year-old boy in a clip-on tie had put $4.75 on a marble counter for a rose, for his mother. Min-ho had not been moved by pity. He had been moved by recognition. But here is the part the story does not let you skip. Danielle's boss, Gretchen, called her into a meeting the following Monday. She had heard about the Aqua Bridge inquiry. Someone had talked, or Min-ho's team had reached out, to Carver and Lane as a courtesy. Gretchen sat across from Danielle in the glass-walled conference room with her hands folded. "I'm going to be honest with you," Gretchen said. "I'm concerned about bandwidth. You have a lot going on personally. This would be a significant undertaking." Danielle looked at her. With a single child at home, the travel alone. "Gretchen," Danielle said. Her voice was level. It was the kind of level that had been built, deliberately, so that nothing underneath it could be heard, unless she allowed it. "In the 3 years I've been at this agency, I have never missed a deadline. I've never asked for an extension. I have never used my child as a reason, and you have not promoted me." Gretchen opened her mouth. "I'm not asking for one now. I'm telling you, I'm taking this contract as an independent consultant. I'll give you 30 days. She stood. She picked up her coffee cup. She left, in the hallway, alone. Her hands were shaking slightly. Not from fear, from relief, from the very specific feeling of having finally said the true thing, to the right person in the right room. She had worn competence like armor for years. She had made herself smaller, quieter, more manageable. She had smiled through every meeting, where her work launched careers that were not hers. She had brought the best dish to every family gathering. She had worn the earrings. She had pretended. She was done pretending. David, Minho's business partner, called her the following week to get aligned on expectations before her contract with Aqua Bridge was finalized. He was polished, Harvard-educated, and spent the first 12 minutes of the call mentioning both of these things. Near the end, he said something that was careful, but not careful enough. "I just want to make sure you understand the scale of what Minho is proposing. This isn't a small project. Our partners and stakeholders tend to expect a certain what?" He paused. Profile. Profile, she repeated. "It's a high-visibility engagement." "David," she said, with the calm of a woman who had spent 34 years being told, in various elegant phrasings, that she did not quite fit. "I built the Phase 1 campaign. That is the reason this company exists, in the form it does today. I didn't get credit for it. I'm getting the contract instead. I think the profile is fine." There was a long silence. "I'll review the finalized terms," David said. "You do that." It is a Saturday in April. Fred's school counselor, a woman named Ms. Erica, young, attentive, the kind of professional who noticed things, had sent Danielle a note the week before. Not a concerning note. An observational one. "Fred is doing really well. He seems lighter lately. I wanted you to know." Danielle had read that word 4 times. She was sitting on the floor of her living room now, surrounded by the detritus of a Lego set, the large, expensive one, the one Fred had been saving $4.75 toward, that they had assembled together over the course of the morning. Fred was currently attempting to attach a piece. That clearly did not attach there, but he was certain it did, and this was a negotiation they had been having for 20 minutes. "It doesn't go there, Fred. It might. The instructions. The instructions are a suggestion." She looked at her son. He was concentrating absolutely. His tongue pushed against the corner of his mouth, the way it always was. When he was working on something he believed in, lighter, she thought. Yes, she could see that. She could feel it too, some barely articulable shift in the air between them, as if a pressure that had been building in both of them had been, not resolved exactly, but named, acknowledged, placed on the table like $4.75, like a white rose, like a business proposal, like the truth said to the right person, in the right room. Her phone buzzed. She looked at the screen. It was Minho, a text, which was rare for him. He preferred email, which Danielle had already categorized as very on-brand. It said, "Philadelphia onboarding call confirmed for May 3rd. Also, Fred mentioned crows. I looked it up. He's right. They are exceptional." Danielle stared at her phone. "Mom, look." She looked up. He had gotten the piece to attach. Somehow, improbably, it fits. "I told you," he said, with the absolute serenity of someone who has learned from someone else that you do not fold, even when you probably should. Danielle laughed. Not the careful laugh, not the performance, the real one, the one that was louder than she intended, the one that came from somewhere below all the armor, and the competence, and the years of proving things to people who had already decided what she was. Fred looked at her. He smiled. It was the smile of a child who has spent a long time worrying about someone and has quietly, recently, stopped. "You good?" Yeah, baby, I'm good." She meant it. For the first time, in a very long time. She meant it. Without the architecture of pretending, on the coffee table between them, in a small glass, a white rose that should have been dead 3 weeks ago, was still holding its shape, still white, still standing. If this story stayed with you, subscribe. Share it with someone who needs to hear it. And tell me in the comments, what moment hit you hardest?